As photographers, we often seem obsessed with owning the latest and greatest gear.
But how much does the equipment you have really matter when it comes to the final image?
On this week's episode of the Bird Photography Show, we're going to find out how much gear really matters.
So yeah, and I see that lately you've been spending a lot of time on the dark side shooting with Nikon gear. I saw you with the big 600, and last week or last episode we talked about, these 200 to 600 millimeter range lenses, and you tricked us. You were secretly testing out a new lens from Nikon that fits that bill, that sort of 200 to 600 millimeter. What'd you think of the Nikon lens?
I think it's amazing that they actually made that lens and that they priced it even $300 below the Sony lens. So it's definitely a very competitive lens. 180 to 600 is a fantastic range. I had a great time with it in the field. I found these kingfishers that were just sort of flying around right in front of me on these sort of dead logs in the middle of a little river. That was awesome. And obviously, 600 millimeters is still not super long on a full frame camera, but on the Z9 with the 45 megapixels, it was still not a problem to get some really nice images. I liked how it rendered the backgrounds. What I always love about the Nikon lenses is definitely the amazing image stabilization, where you can have super low shutter speed handheld images, and handheld video is not a problem at all. And I think that's something that we both like doing in the field, because if you're just out and about walking around taking some photos and then you can just switch into video mode taking some super nice videos, that's something that's really valuable for us if we're doing videos like this, for instance.
Well, that Kingfisher shoot looked really fun, and I'm definitely going to be asking you to take me to that spot next time I'm in Australia, that's for sure. Sony has a 200 to 600, and that Fuji lens was pretty fun to play with. And I really feel like I'm kind of missing this extra 100 millimeters from Canon. I love my 100 to 500, but I really was kind of hoping we'd see a 200 to 600 from Canon.
Is one of these lenses your main lens or is it a secondary lens? Personally, for me, for instance, I prefer having the 100 to 500 millimeter lens because I also have a big 600 millimeter prime lens, and you're the same. Like, if I only could have one lens, I would definitely want a longer sort of zoom range than the 100 to 500. But as a secondary lens, I actually still really like the 100 to 500 because it has amazing image quality, good image stabilization. And the main thing about it is it's bloody tiny. Like, it easily fits into your backpack with a big lens, whereas these 200 to 600 millimeter lenses, they are quite big. Like, not everything is great about the 100 to 500, like how it works with the extenders or that it's an external zoom, but at the same time, being so small is quite advantageous.
Thank you for making me feel better, Jan. No, you make a good point. I've seen some clients that have come on my tours and stuff that have the 200 to 600 and a 600, and that does get a bit bulky to carry around. You know what it comes down to for me? It's sometimes when I'm guiding, I don't carry my big lens. And sometimes I wish I had a walk around lens that had that little bit extra range, and then I still have my 600 for when I'm kind of getting more serious about things. I think a lot of the sort of hobbyist, sort of prosumer bird photography market isn't going to spend, $12 to $20,000 on a 600 millimeter f4.
No.
And so then you're looking for what's the sort of most reasonable longest lens that makes sense to buy. And with Canon right now, it's kind of this 100 to 500. It's just a little bit shorter than you would maybe want.
Canon has a great camera already in that range with the R7 with the 1.6 crop that would pair super well with a lens like this. And most of these other brands don't have that camera.
We'll see what happens when it comes to Canon. Hopefully they'll come up with something. But in the meantime, you've been shooting with the, speaking of expensive lenses, the Nikon 600 millimeter f4 with the drop-in teleconverter. How has that lens been to work with?
It's so nice to just flick the teleconverter in and out. Obviously, you never really have to worry about the teleconverters. It even worked all right with the 2x teleconverter, a separate one attached to it as well. So I really enjoyed it. And what, again, wowed me the most, you must be sick of hearing it by now, but the image stabilization was so crazy. You could easily handhold that big lens. It was super stable, and even like handheld video at 840 millimeters was not a problem at all. So that completely blew me away, and it's just a fantastic overall lens that I wish the other brands will make as well, because it's just so nice to use.
I feel like we're always moving in the direction of potentially, higher megapixel cameras with better zoom lenses. And higher ISO capabilities due to both the sensor and the software. And now if you also have better vibration reduction or image stabilization, we're moving in the direction of more handholdability, less of a need for a tripod, and possibly just more enjoyable bird photography if you can have a smaller, lighter kit that you can just sling over your shoulder and go off into the woods and find birds and enjoy yourself. It's not that much fun lugging around a 600 f4 and a tripod. It's let's just be honest, it's not. So
Now we've talked about so much about Nikon again, but what about some other gear? I think you've been playing around with the R8, haven't you?
yeah, well, our good friends over at Camera Canada, who, by the way, is the episode sponsor of this episode,
Thank
were
you.
nice enough to send me an R8. And so I had the R8 with me to test out. And overall, I enjoyed using it. You know, it's very similar to the R6 II. It's, I believe, the same exact sensor.
So it doesn't sound like there's really not that much not to like about it, other than maybe the missing joystick at the back. But other than that, it really seems like a baby sort of R6 Mark II. And we both have used the R6 Mark II, and that's really a fantastic camera with possibly the best autofocus currently available. And it seems like that came into the R8 as well. So autofocus, everything seemed to be going very well.
Canon's really filling out the low end of the lineup really nicely. I think they're doing a better job of that than some of the other manufacturers. If you're a hobbyist or an amateur looking at like really wanting to get into a great mirrorless camera in those brands, but the cost of admission is extremely steep. Whereas if you look at Canon, you've got the full frame R8 for $1,500, or if you were more interested in a crop body, the R7, also $1,500. So depending on whether you're more of a generalist, landscape, people, macro, a little bit of everything photographer, or if you're dedicated bird photographer, you've got some nice options.
I think you mainly used it on the 600mm prime lens, didn't
Yeah.
you? So that's where also the 24 megapixels are probably not as much of an issue because you have all this focal range. Would you say if you had like just the 100 to 500, you'd obviously struggle a little bit more?
For sure, you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I was out with my 600 f4 and I was often using teleconverters. I was trying to photograph these little beautiful warblers, you know, cerulean warblers and scarlet tanagers and things. And obviously they're often further than you'd want. And like with the R6 II, I felt like I was almost reaching for the 2x converter to get a little more focal length there. It's a very good camera, great autofocus, nice sensor, good image quality. And is it the perfect bird photography camera? Probably not. But at that price point, very attractive. I guess the real question would be, would you, if you're a bird photographer, would you go for an R7 or this one? And that's a tough one because I think this is a better camera, but you get a lot less pixels on your subject. So I would have to really scratch my head on that one. And I would probably lean towards the R7 just for that increased pixel count, I think.
I mean, even both could be a nice 1-2 punch as well. The R8.
Look at
and
this.
you need
This
the
guy
good
is
autofocus.
always trying to buy more equipment. Every time, well, you have to choose this one or this one. Just buy both. What can I say?
Well, it's kind of ironic that we talked so much about gear in this episode so far anyways, when the title of the episode was how much does gear actually matter? And us always talking about it, and obviously all of you guys having an interest in the gear as well means that at least it matters to some degree, but how much does gear matter to you, Glenn? And how much does it matter in the final outcome?
Ultimately, gear does matter. I would not want to be without a mirrorless camera these days. If you said you have to go back and use a DSLR or a film camera, I would feel quite limited. It's hard for me to say, oh no, it doesn't matter. You know, your old Rebel from 10 years ago, you're fine. You're going to get just as great of flight shots as I can do with my R5. That would be a big lie. Technology sometimes makes these big leaps, and all of a sudden you feel like you really do need that new technology, the new gear. However, I've had my 600mm for over 10 years. I have no desire to change it. I did never get the version 3. It was a little bit lighter, whatever, don't need it. Go to the gym. I don't swap over gear that frequently. Typically for me, I have my big lens. I've got a great zoom lens here, and I've got a wide angle lens. I always have my main camera body, which is the one that I probably take 95% of my photos with. And when that one, or when a new version of that one comes out, that one gets relegated to my backup. And then I've got the new version. So when the R5 II comes out, I'm sure that'll be my primary body, and my R5 will go into backup mode. And then I'll sell off whatever the other one is. So there's sort of just this logical flow of gear, unless something spectacular or new comes out. Gear matters sometimes. If you're a bird photographer, it's nice to have the biggest lens you can afford. But once you've got what you can afford and you've got your kit, just forget it. and get out there and take pictures. That's what I think.
If I wasn't doing YouTube, I wouldn't have this crazy amount of gear either. And for years, I've done it exactly like Glenn. I had my first 600 for 6, 7 years. I had my second 600 for 6, 7 years. And usually only had 1 or 2 camera bodies. And now I have a lot more camera bodies because I have 1 or 2 cameras filming me all the time. I have one on a zoom, one on another, one on a tripod. So that has escalated quite quickly these days. But at the same time, my core setup has also remained the same. It's a big 600mm prime lens, and my main camera is still an R5. I have some other cameras, but they all serve some different roles. The main base setup always stays the same as well, and only rarely sort of gets replaced. I don't really shoot with an R3, then an R8, then an R7, then an R5 again as my main birding camera. I pick one camera that I like the most, that gives me the best results, and then I stick with that again until, exactly like you, until there will be a new version, or maybe an R1 comes out and it's so much better than everything else, and we might feel like it makes sense to upgrade to that potentially. At the same time, for now, it feels like an R5 with the 600 is just a very, very good setup, and there's no real reason to change that all the time. I'm definitely a firm believer that gear matters, at least to a degree or to some sort of level. Like you said, if you have a very basic DSLR camera, you will have a lot harder time getting really nice images compared to more modern mirrorless cameras with the miracle autofocus and fantastic image stabilization these have. So to a certain degree, gear definitely matters, but from there on out, your field technique, your knowledge about your subject, and your own creativity is a lot more important than just the pure gear to capture the shot. In the end, it's a mix of everything. Gear is definitely not everything, but I would also say that gear is not nothing. You definitely need to have a decent amount of gear to set you up for the success, but then the ultimate success really depends on your field craft, your creativity, and ultimately some luck as well.
Well, Jan, you know what is just as important as having good gear for photography?
Probably good field technique and good editing.
Good editing is what I was going for. You know, it's so important. We talk so much about gear and we try to talk about techniques and things like that, but of course it's so important. People take these really nice images. They have good equipment, they take nice images, but ultimately they're kind of maybe getting 80% of the way there, or 70% of the way there, or 50% of the way there, because they haven't invested in learning techniques in the digital darkroom. And I think that's so important if you're going to get the absolute most out of the images you capture.
And it doesn't have to be hard. You can do it quite quickly. Glenn edits hundreds of photos in like a day, so he definitely has some good workflows there. But in a world where there's millions of photos uploaded every day, to put in a little bit of extra or learning a little bit extra to make your photos stand out, I think it's very important and definitely something that's worth learning.
I totally agree. So if you guys want to enhance your digital darkroom skills, be sure to check out Jan's masterclass video and my Photoshop ebooks. And we really think that those will help you to take your digital darkroom skills to the next level.
And let me just show you how easy it is to use our presets. We just jump into Camera Raw or Lightroom, click onto the drop-down menu where all the profiles are, and you see our beautiful presets there, and you can scroll through the list, click on the different ones, and get you a fantastic starting point for every single photo. Lots of different lighting situations that will help you so much with just one click to get your images to where they need to be. And then you can continue with our Photoshop workflows to make them look amazing.
Well, with that said, Jan, I think it's about time we jump into the Photo of the Week segment, and we can see if some of these people have great editing skills or not.
Yeah, the first image I brought, I think, was quite well edited, and it's of this barred warbler taken somewhere in Poland. I'm not going to try to pronounce where it was actually taken, in the park, something, and forgive me if I don't say the name either, but I think it's a fantastic photo. I really like that sort of yellow patch in the background with a bit of a brighter background, just sort of really nicely highlighting the bird. And it's actually quite a tricky bird.
Yeah, and nicely presented. The crop is nice. You could have probably done a square here as well, but I actually in this case like the kind of aspect ratio with a little bit more space. And that It's funny how sometimes we have something in the background that's like this that can be tips just to the side of being distracting. But in this case, I think that if you had the whole background just green, it might be a little bit too static. So anyways, great job. I like this little barred warbler. Well done. All right, well, the first image that I brought for us this week is by Prasanth here from the Netherlands, and it's of this beautiful pied avocet. I don't like everything about this image, but I really like a lot about this image. I think it's a beautiful species. I think it's a really cool pose, kind of a very upright, kind of nice posture. Now, Jan, we do this game sometimes. What do you think that I would maybe change in this image if it was you or me?
This is a tricky one. I know what I would change. I think it's slightly dark overall, maybe. I do like how it gives you the feel that it's standing in one of those big sort of shallow lakes. You can see the water, then you can see the reeds, then you can see the trees in the distance and the sky. So I like those layers there. I do think it's pretty low sort of light, so I could see a scenario where I'd probably pull some yellow out of the plumage of the bird as well, making it a little bit whiter, a little bit crisper. So the things I would change personally is I would give it a little bit more saturation, make it a little bit brighter, and just sort of clean up the plumage of the bird. What were you thinking?
Ding, ding, ding. You are correct, sir. Yeah, I think overall this is an image where it just needs a little to be, overall it needs to be a little bit brighter.
On to the next image of this Oriental Dwarf Kingfisher, and I don't think that bird needs any extra pop here. The colors are off their face. It's pretty crazy looking bird, and I was afraid you're gonna pick this image because I know you have a little secret love affair with colorful kingfishers. So I thought I'd scoop in and pick that one. I think it's just a really nice shot. Stunning colors, really nice pose. Even the lizard is posing quite well in the bird's mouth. So I thought it was an overall really nice thing. The only really small thing that I found a little bit distracting is this sort of big mossy out of focus patch right underneath the sort of lizard's head. So I would have probably maybe tried to just desaturate it, darken it down a bit, or even sharpen it a little bit extra. I don't know if they cloned something there, or I don't know. It just looks a little bit funky. So that's an area I would work on. So it's not so obvious. Even if you just make it darker, pull out some color, I think then you won't even be able to notice it anymore.
It's hard to believe that that's a real bird.
Yeah.
I've never seen one of these little dwarf kingfishers, but it's hard for me to imagine that the bird actually looks like that, and that wasn't somebody just going wild with the saturation. But I know that is what it looks like. Anyways, great shot, really cool bird, really cool species, and a great moment that you captured here. All right, so the second image that I brought for us this week is by Bashir Nidin, and it's of this Indian pitta. And what I thought was kind of unique about this image was, you don't often see good images of pittas in flight. No. We do see a lot of these pitta images, a lot of areas in Asia where they set up sort of hides and are feeding them worms or whatever, and in South America, certainly that's the case. But it's rare that you see a pitta image in flight, and in this case, the bird actually has quite a nice flight pose as well. But once again, Jan, what do you think I might change about this image?
Well, I think, first of all, it's so hard with pittas because they're usually in the dark rainforest. I mean, when I shoot pittas here, it's usually at like a 50th of a second, so you can't really think of flight shots. Every time I see one fly, I wish I could get a flight shot because they have all these amazing like wing patterns and stunning colors there. But I think in this case here, it's definitely too dark, and it's not even a little bit too dark. It's probably almost 2 stops too dark. And this could be again the case where someone is afraid of blowing out the blue on the wing. If you just do like one sort of Lightroom overall adjustment, that would blow out pretty quickly, also because it's so saturated. It blows out just because it's so saturated. So this will be one where you would definitely go in, levels adjustments, a big curve adjustment to bring that whole image to life. Because I think, as you say, it's a stunning shot, but it just needs a bit of extra pop to really stand out. And this will be a good example of what we said before with the editing. You have a stunning image, and if you master the editing, you can actually transform it into like a breathtaking shot.
Overall, this image is fantastic. It just needs
stunning.
A little tweak.
So the last image I brought is of this beautiful mute swan family, just the mum or the dad with a few babies feeding. And I just thought it was a really nice sort of scene. I always like seeing the babies up close. It's a nice low angle, and there's just enough of the parent in the shot as well to give you a feel of a whole family shot. I think in terms of a crop, this is done really, really well because you see the baby's large enough. You still have the parent in it, which is actually quite hard getting the parent in the shot with their long neck. So I think it's very well done there. There's a few sort of really bright spots on the parent's neck. You could probably selectively work on darkening those a little bit, but overall, I thought it was just a really nice image. Is there something that you would change?
No, I mean, I love these types of family portraits, and anytime you get sort of cute little baby birds, especially these quite young swans, these cygnets. And I agree with you. And this is again kind of we're having a lot of the images have the same issues this time
Yeah.
around, where there's and with these bright white birds in the water, ducks or swans, you often get these sort of brighter hotspots that you need to deal with.
Yeah.
And that might help this one a little bit, but you're so drawn to the cuteness of the bird and the drips coming off of the swan that you don't really even notice it. So this is kind of nitpicking. So
Yeah.
overall, a really cool shot by Nick Protani. All right, and so for my last image this week, I brought kind of a fun one by Wildlife Ducky. Even the name is fun. but normally I would not be so keen on a bird landing on an obviously man-made perch. However, in this case, it's almost like, was this photoshopped? Because, a kingfisher landing on a no fishing sign with a fish in its bill, while it may be a little corny or whatever, it's definitely the kind of shot that you could see like going viral on the internet because it's
Yeah.
such a neat moment. And these European kingfishers are so, widespread and loved that it's a really cool shot. Well, I don't know, this would be interesting. Wildlife Ducky, if you're watching, let us know down in the comments. Is this legit or did you Photoshop that sign in there? But overall, I really like this shot. I think it's fun. And sometimes you can go outside of the box of sort of the normal bird photography style and do something that's just fun. And I think that's a great example of that.
And with these kingfishers, once they're habituated to landing on a certain thing, like a certain spot or like a certain perch, that you can probably swap it out quite easily. So it probably wouldn't be too hard.
Yeah.
And I mean, the bird would love landing on this anyway. So it's definitely one of those. I think I've seen a few iterations of that kind of shot over the years on the internet. It's just such a sort of classic and fun shot. And I think on that note, it's also time to wrap up this week's episode of the Bird Photography Show. We thank our sponsor, Camera Canada, for sponsoring this episode. Thank all of you guys for checking out our pro sets, masterclasses, and ebooks. We know they've helped you a lot, and it's great to hear your feedback. And yeah, I guess we will see you in a next episode very soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye, and don't forget to subscribe.